Heyo, Plaidman here. So today is T-Day, Tuesday, and yeah, I'm still making one video at least every weekday. So the question is, what are we talking about today? What's going on? Well, we still have the war in Ukraine. I've been watching interesting videos about part of the reason why Russia's not doing as well as they thought they would. Simplicity of it is they have a boatload of tanks, and frankly, it's tanks are just kind of big moving targets, and they're pretty easy to destroy if you have the right stuff, and Ukraine has a lot of the right stuff to destroy tanks, and yada, yada, yada. Russia doesn't have the right enough people, not the right enough people, but like they're basically the army is a little inferior in the grand scheme of things. But this is kind of the issue that you run into with this stuff. I mean, a lot of people like to refer to China similarly as like a paper tiger, because yeah, they have the numbers, but do they actually have the will to fight? And that kind of goes into another thing, which is long gone are the days where, for king and country, you'd have people fight. Some people do, and there's actually a lot of people in the military where they fight for family, for the flag, for their country. My only reference would be people in America who do that. And that's super admirable, but realize that it's all well and good to join the armed forces and be part of that and trying to protect, and from a defensive standpoint, even if you're across the pond or whatever on the other side of the world. But when it comes to actually like invading someone, there is an interesting thing. Like, even if you think of just America and the recent wars that we were involved in, even though they were not really well done, the initial intention was good intention. So it wasn't going over there like, we're going to stick it to these people. It was like, no, we're going to go over there and try and do a positive thing. Now, or even from a defensive standpoint, like, supposedly Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which they didn't end up having. So that kind of was bunk. But anyways, so I didn't really want to do a whole subject on Russia and stuff like that. Honestly, today was kind of like a hodgepodge of random concepts. One is I just wanted to, obviously we all know Russia's good, or Russia's not doing very well. That's not really the end of the world. I do want to say, if you haven't heard this before or whatever, the reason why your gas price is the way it is has nothing to do with Russia attacking Ukraine. Nothing, okay? Yes, we do get gas from Russia, but the reason why the prices are going up, they were going up before Russia decided to invade Ukraine. So it really has nothing to do with that. If you're trying to it's because of that, it's not. If you don't know what it is, I'm not going to bother trying to explain it to you. You should do your own research. You should go and look and see why. When did the gas prices start hiking up and going up? What happened just before then? And come to your own conclusions. Give you a hint. Starts with a B, ends with an N. Anyhow, so there's that. I had a very interesting conversation, something a little bit more fun. Many of you probably have relationships or have had relationships in the past. I've been having a wonderful relationship with many peaks and valleys, okay? And I'll be honest and say most of those peaks and valleys I can take full responsibility. Like, it was because of me, it was something I did or said or didn't do or didn't say, and so on and so forth. And it was a very interesting thing because my fiance and I we're obviously engaged, and we went from being engaged to we're gonna get married in 10 months or something like that. So we're coming up on it. I think we got 7 months left till we're married. All that's well and good, but we had a very interesting conversation, which we had a conversation about the subject before, the subject being kids, okay? And it was very interesting because I have a certain opinion on kids. I love kids. I do really well with kids. I want a passel of kids, yada, yada. And she does love kids as well, but it's not the same kind. It's not the same as me. It's different. She loves kids. It's just not the same as mine, which is totally fine. We're different people. But what was interesting to me is I'm looking at it and I'm like, but we should be the same on this subject, and rah, 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 rah. And I thought we were in agreement. And even though I wasn't being verbally about it, it was there. It was in my space and in my face, and she could get that I was kind of merp about it, and she was trying to get me to talk about it. And I didn't know how to talk about it in a way that was like appropriate, because sometimes when you get a sticky situation and you're just like, I don't know how to say this without being mean. And sometimes I find that it's just either you preface it with like, look, if you really want me to say this, I can say it. I just don't know how to say it not rude. And then if they do want to hear it, then hopefully they understand that, hey, this is not going to be, you're not going to like this. This is going to hurt your feelings. Like, I warned you. Try not to have your feelings hurt. Or the other way is like, you just don't say it. And then I would argue that maybe the smarter thing to do is just to zip and not even like, just know in the back of your mind that that's not a good thought and just throw it away. Come back later with it and be like, and you'll probably come up with a better way to say it anyways. But that was fine. And it sat in my space for a little bit. And then I was talking to my mom and dad because we were talking about other stuff. And I was asking, I don't know, I wasn't even like asking them about that, but it kind of came up. And it was very interesting because, simply put, my mom gave me good advice, as she tends to do. And hopefully you all have people in your life who give you good advice. And she basically, as I'm going to jokingly say, told me to like, shut the F up. Like, stop being so concerned about this thing. Because there are certain things that you have no control over. And, you've all heard the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make a drink, right? And not to say my fiance is a horse, and it's not necessarily about her, and not a literal analogy, but the point of it is I have a perspective, and I don't even know if my perspective is right. And she has one, and maybe hers is more right than mine. Doesn't really matter. But because we do love each other, and we have gone through all these things, and even before we got into the engagement and got married, we were very much like, hey, we're in this together. Like, where we're going and how we're going is together, okay? We might help build different sides of the tower, but we're building the same tower, right? Or maybe she's working on the balcony part of the top of the tower and I'm working on the foundation or something else, but it's still the same tower. And, if I don't particularly like how she's dealing with a certain element of it, we can talk about it, but it's supposed to be both of your create. Okay? And a tower is a really good analogy. I personally, my favorite analogy in general for human beings is you are a castle. You have a vast empire, okay? And just like a life, there's plenty of resources and opportunities on your land, okay? And everyone starts building like a town center or whatever. A little mini keep, or eventually you build a castle. And some people have really strong walls around their castle so nobody can get around or go in or whatever. And some people, that's just open, and they're just very open and yada, yada, yada. And none of it, there's no wrong way, but generally if you assume people are castles, when you join in a relationship with someone, you effectively move your castle and your land over right next to theirs. And then you start building a castle together. Like a joint, like a walkway or whatever. And they have access to your castle, inside your walls, and deepest, darkest dungeons and secrets, and vice versa. And in doing that, in bringing these two kingdoms together, not only are you joining that, and that's terrific, but it doesn't just 1 and 1 makes 2, it makes 1 and 1, and now your kingdom is exponentially stronger because perhaps they have stuff that yours didn't, and now you have access to resources, and you can do this with it, and you can level up, and yada, yada. The analogy goes crazy and wild, and it's fun. But what I realized is that, boy, oh boy, it's very important to understand that the other person is doing their thing and to help them in any way that they need help, okay? And sometimes they're not going to want the help, and that's okay. Don't be mean. Let them do their thing. Offer help. And that's one thing I've had to learn as well, is just, I want to help. And I have so many out points, and my fiance tries to help me, and I'm not very good at accepting help. And she's so much better at it than me. But it's just, hey, it's a mix and match, and we try and work it out. So, lesson of the day, simply put, is work on yourself. As per usual, I try to say it often, work on yourself and what you're working on. Be there for your loved ones. Listen. Don't just talk all the time. I do it often, but don't just talk all the time. Listen and see if you can actually help them. And another thing, I'll leave this. Like I had an idea where I was like, oh, blah blah blah. Let's do this, and my mom was like, oh, but I thought you said you were gonna do that like way back in the day. What happened? And I realized, oh my God, yeah, you're right. I didn't like. Okay, so here's what I need to do. So ultimately, what it amounts to, this whole thing, I would argue that all of life focuses on really one thing, which is communication. To the extent that you communicate with those around you, you'll have a better life. That's it for today. Thank you. Plaid Man out. See you tomorrow. Bye.